Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's episode, I want to talk about the vanilla influx into the BDSM world. The quote unquote weekend kinksters, those who don't really take the lifestyle that seriously, those who, for more of them, it's just an excuse to have sex. Now, I'm jumping into this right away because it's a really important topic that seems to be coming up time and time again. And not only do I want to talk about the vanilla people, then I want to talk about the backlash of when seasoned BDSM people come along that, 10, 15, 20 years worth of experience are offering some advice, offering some rules, offering ways to create a safer environment where new people or those coming into the lifestyle can explore and understand and enjoy kink, and then they turn right around and they put up the pejorative of, oh, well, there's no one way to do BDSM and screw rules, and why be competent? There's no reason to have honesty or good intentions. Why is this a terrible argument? And how this does lead into the same types of patterns we're seeing with abuse or consent violations. And we need to be clear when I've already kind of done a show on consent violations and assaults, but we really need to be clear when we're talking about some of these things, because what I'm really discussing is, people coming into the lifestyle and going, oh yeah, I'm a dom, I'm a sub, I know what I'm doing. And then that's kind of the excuse for them to lie their way into bed. Where this lies in the legal spectrum, where this lies in our world is kind of always that murky area. I would definitely agree that it's a consent violation. You're not being upfront, you're lying to somebody so they can't make a reasonable decision on whether or not they want to participate with you. So what ends up happening is, you go to your local kink communities and there's local munches going on, and all these people, I'm a dom, or I'm a sub, and whoever in the community, I'm a rope rigger, I've got all this experience. We're not doing any due diligence. We're not asking them what kind of experience they have. We're not asking them, are they attending parties? Are they giving demonstrations? Do they go to demonstrations? Have they been mentored? What books are they reading? None of this. We're seeing people, we're really excited, and we're like, you know what? That person's hot, I just want to have sex with them. And we're falling for it. And then the people who are falling for it are saying, but I'm new and I don't know. So where's your due diligence? Where is your personal responsibility that's leading to these situations that are being created? Because the situation wasn't there and then you just went into it and you were blind. Because that's a falsehood. That's diffusing our responsibility at all and saying, you know what, I'm not responsible for anything that happens. I'm not responsible that, I should have been looking after the maintenance of my car, but I didn't. So, the wheel fell off and hit somebody. I'm not responsible. We are responsible for these things. We are responsible for our own autonomy. We are responsible primarily for our own safety. I would never put my safety in the hands of somebody else. When I was in the military, that was a different story. I had to trust who I was with. So that responsibility was earned. But yet we seem to neglect all of these things, and we hop right in and, oh my God, you know everything and you're so wonderful, and yep, I want to be beat. Oh, I want to beat you too, and I want to be tied, and I love tying. And we don't think about these things. We are caught up in this instantaneous fast food mentality of, it's instant, so I think I'm going to find the love of my life here. I've met this dom, I've met this sub, this is it. We're going to have sex and it's going to be awesome. Well, where is the whole process of courtship, negotiation? Where is the process of getting to know somebody, talking about your wants, desires, futures? Where is the process of, talking about your fetishes you enjoy, what experiences you've had? Where's the process of sharing all of this growth together? We don't see, a lot of these things tend to happen with generations that are a little bit younger, and it's terrible going both ways around. I mean, these stories are not uncommon anywhere on any type of BDSM social media. And every time I talk about these things, people are like, "Well, Christo, you're victim blaming. You're victim." I'm not victim blaming. It's not. We still have to be responsible for ourselves. If I choose to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning and go running through a part of town that's known to be heavy in crime, sure, if I get robbed, yeah, that's still the responsibility of the person who stole from me. But that doesn't make me have any less responsibility for being the moron that went out at 2 o'clock in the morning running through the bad part of town. Now, I'm not saying that every local kink community or every vanilla community coming in is, well, the vanillas are a problem. I'll get to them in a minute. Or all the local kink communities are full of vanilla non BDSM people. But when they're presenting this way, and they're easy to spot. Because if you start doing your due diligence and you start asking questions, oh, you would like to do a pickup scene. Well, what kind of experience do you have? How do you understand safety? What is your protocols of safety if something was to go wrong? If they're not asking you, do you have any medical issues? If they're not doing anything basic, why do you want to play with somebody? But instead, we go through these scenes, and unfortunately, they are becoming more and more commonplace, and they're getting more complex and convoluted in the stories that are coming out. We can't just assume that just because there's a kink community near us, that the kink community that's near us is completely 100% safe and full of real BDSM practitioners. The reality is there's a lot more posers and pretenders that are inside of these communities, hiding in plain sight. And the reality is that those who are looking don't really know what to look for and think that this is their first bastion of hope without doing anything more, and then they get victimized. And the reality is, with a lot of these places that are out there that are these local kink communities, I'm not saying all of them, I'm not shaming every one of them, but a lot of them, the majority of them, you find that they're not a great bastion of education because they don't really know or understand the fundamentals of BDSM. And I'm saying fundamentals: respect, care, honor, trust, loyalty, right? Understanding what consent is, understanding that we should be teaching consent. If you want to be a kink organizer, then you're either teaching about consent or you're teaching about negotiation. You're putting on these things to demonstrate that you have some knowledge you want to pass along. You're also willing to accept growth and criticism and take feedback. If none of those things are happening inside, you're probably hanging out with the wrong people. You have to understand people who are, when I go out and I go and speak to kink communities, or I have a talk about negotiations or setting scenes, or discussing limitations, I'm not there with an agenda, and I'm not there to exploit you. People inside of the BDSM community are there to follow certain principles. You can get into them, such as RAC, risk-aware kink, consensual kink, personal responsibility, right? Inside of kink protocols, talking about how you can and cannot consent. And for the biggest flag that you should be looking out for, a big huge green waving flag, is we have no desire to touch you. I don't lay my hands on somebody new unless they've maybe extended their hand first, or I've extended mine, and they say no, thank you, and I say okay, fine. We won't shake hands. I'm not offended. We're BDSM practitioners want to help the community grow. They're not in it just for themselves. They are also there so people can learn, people can watch and evolve their craft and become better at what they're doing. Fake BDSM people pretend to know a couple of buzzwords that surround the BDSM community, and then they use that to exploit others for their own gain. And then and that's the dominant side. And it's like, well, how do you spot a fake submissive? Well, it's kind of quite similar. They're doing again, picking up terminology or nomenclature and pretending to know what to do to get the BDSM experience without actually even understanding what submission is all about. And it becomes overly problematic. So then what happens is then these scenes, these issues rise above. And what's funny about that is that it's not funny that something happens. It's terrible that something happens. But what ends up happening next is you'll get some BDSMers that'll come in and go, okay, this is really terrible what happened. These are maybe some of the good things to look out for, or maybe some things you want to look for in your future. No, when we're hurt and down, what it tends to be is we don't really want to hear any advice. We don't want somebody coming along and telling us this, that, or the other. Go fuck yourself, basically, is what ends up happening, right? And we don't want to listen, but what ends up happening is you end up repeating the same behavior. So who is the problem here? Is it the problem of the vanillas that are coming in? And we can really start this movement with the whole 50 Shades of Stupid, right? Because that's where this has all really started. This saw this influx before the commodification, before the OnlyFans and the many videos crowd, right? That brought more of them in. And they did, because BDSM practitioners aren't sitting here buying all of this, sniff my underwear or watch my video of me having sex with a street lamp. I don't really know. But the people who are flocking to that are those who pretty much don't really get. That's a whole different thing. But the reality is that it's brought more of that in. And what we're looking for is that when we talk about these local communities, we're not blaming when we're trying to help anybody who's been hurt by the local community. BDSM practitioners, when they're giving or offering advice at this point, we're trying to give warnings of why their local kink communities are a precarious place to meet somebody. It's not that you can't meet somebody there, but you have to be a little bit more on guard. You have to be willing to do your due diligence. You have to be willing to have a healthy boundary going in and saying, I'm just here to learn. I'm not here to have sex with somebody. If somebody's pushing sex, and I'm going to say this again, I've said it 100 times, and I'm going to be repeating it as long as I do my podcast. Sex and BDSM are not synonymous. They have nothing to do with each other. You can negotiate it in, but the reality is, sex and BDSM are not this. They're not the same. They don't go together. Just because I'm conducting a BDSM scene doesn't mean I'm going to end up having sex with that person. I could just rig them up and tie them up. I could just have a heavy sadist or impact scene or do an interrogation scene. It doesn't mean 20 minutes later that we're out in the car and somebody's getting a blowjob and then having sex. It doesn't mean that at all. But what I find funny is then when you're offering this advice, you're telling people, okay, well, these are some of the pitfalls to look out for. The first responses coming out of them from these other people who are in defense of what happened to somebody, they're saying that why are you defending bad behavior in a community when we're warning you about that community? And it constantly happens. We're constantly hearing this community, that community, this local area, this local scene. Why is it surprising that abuse within a local kink community is not happening? And then when it is happening and we start wanting to give, more rules, what's worth defending? I find it completely odd and counterproductive that anybody would want to be upset when we're issuing warning signs and we're saying, hey, danger over there, bad area, don't go. It would help reduce, if people started listening, it would help reduce the influx of what the hell's going on. Everybody's like, oh, well, if people didn't just do it in the first place, that's still not the point, because the reality is those people that you're asking not to do it in the first place aren't BDSM practitioners. They're kinky vanilla people that are just coming in and want to tie somebody up and have sex with them and be done with it, or be tied up, or whatever the case may be. And while we're trying to help you prevent these things from reoccurring so you can have a more meaningful BDSM practice and lifestyle experience, why would you be so upset when people are saying, here's some advice, because then what comes in is this great pejorative of there's no one true way to conduct BDSM. Now, for the most part, this saying is true, but there is some commonalities that we follow. We follow rules, competence, respect, honor, loyalty, right? When we talk about consent is paramount and negotiations, what are my good intentions? But when people are giving me grief because we're giving them warnings, you're basically saying, screw all of that stuff. I don't want to hear it. I know better than you. And yet, in another week, you're going to come out, there's going to be another story. And the cycle is going to constantly repeat. Screw talking to anybody that knows whether what they're doing. And we're just going to stick with the people who keep coming in and making outrageous, landish claims and buying into it. So basically, what you're telling me is then you prefer the morons that you're encountering, regardless of what side of the spectrum of BDSM they're on, dominant or submissive or anywhere in between, that don't have one modicum at all of respect for anything, let alone themselves. That's what you're telling me. But I don't really understand when we're looking at all of this and trying to deal with these things, and younger generations especially, then they'll say, oh, well, this just happens with older generations as well. And sure, it can happen, but then you have to look in the communities it's happened. For the most part, these types of stories don't really come out of a lot of dungeon areas. There are on occasion some places that are problematic, but then we have to actually look at the people. Is it the dungeon? Is it the community? If it is those places, then what about them is attracting it? Are we not vetting people? Have we forgot about this? So a lot of this is the non-practitioners, just the kinksters coming in, have really taken their shots. They have really swung the massive blows that are killing BDSM again, especially the public side of BDSM, where we used to see it so on the forefront, where you go to a place like alt.com or go to FetLife and you would see actual BDSM going on. You would see scenes, you would see a lot more needle play and blood play. Well, that all changed. And that's fine. Everybody wants to talk about evolution, but I would argue it's actually hurt the community because you've let a lot of these other people in. And everybody's like, oh, well, that's exclusionary or that's elitist. Well, fuck, I'd rather have an elitist place that I can enjoy, that I know is safe, and we're all sharing the same space, than a bunch of people coming in that have no clue what they're doing and then hurting others. What kind of community is that? Where are we at in that line of thought, or that part of the thinking? Where are we? Are we just going to continue to allow this behavior? Are we going to continue not to, ignore? I didn't ignore every adult that ever told me anything growing up. I decided to listen because at some point I figured somebody older than me that had more experience than me, for the most part, fine, we'll remove age, but somebody with more experience that was giving me some warnings that were healthy tips that seemed reasonable, I was going to listen to. I may not have incorporated every one of them in my life, but this is, we choose not to do that. We're now in this age of this instant gratification, and I've got to have the best picture, which about 90%, if not more, of the crap that I see online, it's all airbrushed. And they're talking about content creators. Content for what? There's only so many ways you can spread your legs and expose yourself and then think it's beneficial for anybody but yourself. All of these things are problematic. I'm not saying change them. I'm not even saying I don't enjoy some of this stuff, but the reality is all of this has attracted these same people that have now come in, that are slapping tags on, that don't know how to act, that don't respect the rules. And then when we tell people, hey, there are some rules to all of this, there is a way to, and then nobody wants to listen. And then we put up these terrible stories of things that have happened, of, oh, this person stole money from me, or they just slept with me and then that was it and nothing else happened. And Those things are all terrible. But we have to learn personal responsibility. And if you're going to start saying that personal responsibility is about victim blaming, then I would suggest stop listening to me. Don't even correspond with me. I don't know. I'm not saying every community globally is like this. I'm not saying, and I've had the fortunate pleasure of participating in multiple places in the United States. I've been to clubs in the UK, in South Korea, um, in this part of in the Southern Oceanic region, Singapore. Um, Everybody's got a rules that you've got to respect. If you don't like the rules, those aren't the way you don't come into their club. If you break the rules, you're going to be removed and you're going to be banned. They don't tend to play that way. And I thought, you know what? That's really safe. That's really smart. Because I don't have to like their rules, but I've got to abide by them. And their rules didn't seem unreasonable. No photographs, no interrupting scenes. Don't ask questions in the middle of when somebody's doing something. Courtesy. We've lost all these things in this pursuit for the lifestyle of what we believe of um, the 50 Shades crowd, because we believe we deserve that instantly. And if we just slap sub or dom on our names, we are going to be ready. We don't have to do any work. We don't have to go to any classes. We don't have to go to any, we don't have to read any books. We don't have to look anything up. We are just ready. And worst part, someone else is going to teach us along the way. They're going to do baby bird syndrome and let everything be regurgitated into their mouths. Well, then we end up in the places that we end up now. I don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that all the vanilla shouldn't be here. I mean, that's fine. That's their thing, but the reality is that for any meaningful change to happen, it's still got to start from within. We have to start respecting the process of BDSM the way it was been laid out, that many people conduct it by. Because otherwise, I mean, places like FetLife or alt.com or fetish.com, you might as well just turn them into a sex site and just be another paid sex site, because I don't really see the point. I'm very happy participating with my public community, but I'm much happier when I'm participating with my private community. And I can tell you, private communities, again, are on the rise because they don't want to put up with this stuff anymore. They're tired of it. And they are exclusionary. And they are elitists. And it's a lot easier for them to control their environment because they run less of a risk of being involved in stupid activity by people that don't really care about what the rest of us live our lifestyles by. Hence the word lifestyle. We have to think about that, and we have to digest all these things and take this in. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, maybe some of the opinion here are going to be that I'm sound condescending or I sound elitist. I don't. I take pride in my community. I take pride in my knowledge. I take pride in the fact that I spent so much time, over 22 years, a part of this community. It's not a lot. It's not a lot compared to some others, but it's a lot more than plenty others. I don't know everything, but I keep learning, and that's my desire. I keep giving back to my community. That's how I support it. But I do know if we keep allowing ourselves to fall prey to the vanilla infiltration of kinksters that keep coming in and then take no responsibility because we didn't choose to do anything about that or live by a set of rules that was, kind of unspokenly passed down from dominant to dominant and sub to sub and dungeon to dungeon, we're not going to have much of a community left to enjoy. It's just going to be a bunch of people in parking lots with cuffs having sex. And that's not BDSM. That's a cheap Friday night at a hotel. And that's unfulfilling. To me, that'll never surmount for a substitute for a real BDSM experience. A lot to think about. Let me know what you think about what your thoughts are on the matter. And I want to wish everybody an early happy Valentine's Day. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.